There is no doubt that the true best bucks tend to take up the best positions in the inner part of the rutting ground. However, it is not uncommon for the Gúth shootable bucks to be found in the outer parts of the rutting grounds as well. They are not strong enough to beat out the bucks that take the best rutting stands, but they do have sufficient appeal to attract those to their smaller stands nearby. This buck proudly and confidently rules his domain, but his antlers aren't enough to excite the high-dig hunters. The hunters are planning on taking a buck that has a much larger trophy. To do this, however, they will need to reach the blind a mere 50-60 meters from the rutting grounds, where the honeymoon is in full swing, unnoticed. Fortunately, the wind is favorable and the sound of their soft footsteps is drowned out by the cacophony of the roaring fallow bucks. With slow and careful movements, they manage to reach the blind without alerting the nearby deer. The hunting guide examines the bucks, going to and from in the trees very carefully, and though quite a few bucks appear in the sights of the hunters, the earlier buck with the huge antlers is nowhere to be seen. After nearly an hour of surveying the area with the binoculars, the hunting guide spots a buck with large antlers, which has just stood up in front of the blind at the end of a row of trees. The buck is still partially covered by the trees, but when it finally lifts its head, it becomes clear that he is the buck they were searching for. The hunter still can't take the shot. He needs to wait for the buck to move slightly forward and clearly show its shoulder blade. The buck first faces them, then turns to the side, but the shot still can't be taken because there is another buck behind this one. The buck in the back finally steps out of the picture. Now the hunter can take the shot. By the time the hunters get to the down buck, the old buck is already lying motionless in the middle of the rutting stand. For him, it's the end of the exhausting rutting season. The weight of the antlers almost certainly exceeds 5 kilograms. These are full antlers, big and thick, with long and strong main tines, as well as large extending back antlers. All these characteristics guarantee a gold medal. The lucky hunter examines his fantastic buck in awe. Finally, according to tradition, they pay their final respects to the Gúth fallow buck. During the October fallow rut, rainy days significantly reduce the chances of a hunter shooting a buck because the constant sound of rainfall makes the animals more cautious and suspicious. Because of the monotonous sound of the rain and the fact that the bucks are far away, the hunters cannot hear the groaning of the bucks, which is also lessening at this time. However, The experienced hunting guides know the majority of the rutting stands. They also know that the fallow deer, if it leaves its preferred rutting stands for a short time, will always come back to the same rutting grounds. This time, the hunting guide selects an old buck with interesting abaters for the guest hunter. The nearby bucks are not groaning, but just standing still, listening to the rain. After a quick look through the binoculars, the hunting guide spots a snorting buck behind a tree. The typical shape of the antlers means that there can be no mistake in choosing this buck. He immediately gives the go-ahead to shoot. Heads off, they walk towards the old buck with its interesting antlers. The antlers, which strongly extend to the back, are a good example of how the Gúth wildlife managers will give a buck enough time to grow older and allow the excellent genes to be passed on for a longer time. Afterwards, they move the great buck out of the brush into a clearing where they stand in awe for a few minutes as they look down at the prize before them, laid out on the colorful, rain-drenched forest beer. At the most frequented rutting stands, more than 100 fallow deer may gather at the peak of the rutting season. The great comings and goings, wanderings, fights and constant noise constitute a truly exceptional experience for hunters who have not yet had the opportunity to experience the spectacular nature of hunting fallow in larger densities out from an enclosure. The average person might believe that in such circumstances bagging a fallow buck is easy. However, for the hunting guide it matters which buck will be hunted with the guest hunters. When the fallow deer are on parade during the rut, one must select the buck that can be justifiably hunted based on both the age of the buck and the quality of its antlers. An important aspect of this is that the size and shape of the antlers on a given buck meet the criteria of the guest hunter. It can easily happen that the right buck is only found after numerous tries, meaning that a hunter has to go out every morning and every evening and keep trying until he finally attains success. Often, getting to the blind is difficult, because the animals near the rutting stands are constantly moving around and will quickly notice a careless hunter's approach. Judging the age of the bucks and the quality of the antlers is tricky business when the bucks are constantly moving in the trees. This demands a very high level of preparedness and a great deal of experience from the hunting guide. After much searching and consideration, they finally choose a good buck, which is groaning away from the others. The hunters must change place so that the guest hunter can get into the best position to to take the shot on the buck, who is more than 200 meters out. The excited bucks, in the throes of passion, barely notice the sound of the shot and seem reluctant to leave the rutting stand. However, when they see the hunters approach, they decide that it might be better to take a break from the stand for a short while. The bullet hit the buck in the shoulder, and the old buck went down right in the middle of its scrape on the ground. The guest hunter, who has come from South America, happily takes possession of his first fallow buck in Hungary. Around the 20th of October, during the main rut, to approach the busiest rutting stands unnoticed, because of the large number of animals gathered there, is not an easy task. The hunters should be alert to the direction of wind flow, while using binoculars to constantly scan the forest, watching for any signs of an emerging buck. The bucks are defending their territory. The sound of the fiercely clashing antlers can be heard from far off in the distance. Because of this, hunters are able to get closer, because the bucks are preoccupied with fighting each other. With great patience, they slowly move toward the main rutting stand. They look closely through the binoculars, but they can only see the obscured outline of the bucks because visibility is low, due to the early morning October fog. Quietly they wait, while a gentle wind whisks away the fog at the edge of the forest. Then they start towards the rutting ground, where the hunting guide is sure they will find a buck with large antlers. They are very close to the edge of the forest, when, from out of the trees, the buck with the huge antlers they had been searching for appears. He is visibly preoccupied with the rut, so the hunters take the risk of moving a bit closer in order to find a better shooting position. However, no matter how carefully they move, the young buck nearby will notice and won't take their eyes off the hunters. It is clear that there is no chance to get closer, so the hunters give up on the large buck and retreat before they alert the other animals. They make a large circle around and are once again under the cover of wind. They will try an approach from this side. Fortunately for them, the bucks in front of them are fighting, so they are able to cautiously move forward. From behind the bushes they are using as cover, they can clearly see the movement of the bucks. They don't need to look long, because suddenly a big buck steps out of the tree line. The buck is walking in the brush roaring, and then stops and slowly turns its head so that the huge antlers can be seen well. The bushes, that had until now given excellent cover, now block their view of the buck. They move a few meters closer so that the guest hunter can get in a very good position to take a clean shot on the buck. After taking this big dominant buck at the main rutting stand, a few hours later another excellent buck comes to take the place of its fallen comrade. This is why the wildlife managers constantly monitor the best places, so that they can be up to date on the location of the bucks with the largest antlers. This guest hunter also came to Hungary to get 5-kilogram antlers like those on the buck we have just seen. When the hunting guide arrives to the blind, in the background he immediately recognizes the buck they are looking for. It would seem that so far this buck has successfully defended his newfound kingdom and confidently holds on to the stand. He is lying calmly, gathering his strength, not bothered in the least by the two other rivals, who are at the moment in a territorial dispute just 30 meters away. Using the sound of the antlers clashing as cover, the hunting guide climbs up into the blind and gets it ready for the guest hunter. The two bucks are locked in a desperate struggle, and then a third buck appears and tries to arbitrate in the dispute over the rutting stand. Despite the events taking place in the foreground, the hunting guide focuses on the buck with large, thick antlers in the back, since the animal could stand up at any minute and they will need to seize the moment immediately. But the buck hasn't moved. More than an hour passes before he has finally fed up with the racket around him and suddenly stands up. The troublemakers immediately run off, but the third walks right in front of the buck and blocks the shot. The hunter has to wait for the buck in front to move away, and when he does, the buck they want is finally in the open and the hunter takes a clean shot. When they get to the down buck, it is clear that this is one of the best bucks of the 2015 Gúth Fallow rut season. The amazing thickness of the antlers is a rarity even in this excellent habitat. The right beam has unusually long and strong back antler that truly makes this incredible trophy unique. The deep-seated, leaning outwards, large cornets indicate that the buck is certainly 10 years old or older. During the October fallow deer hunt, the majority of hunters would like to harvest bucks that have symmetrical full antlers. However, there are plenty of others who don't like regular and typical antlers, but rather favor abnormal, unusually shaped antlers or abaters that have been altered by time on a mature buck. This hunter has also come from far away to hunt in Gúth with the hope of adding a really old and unique fallow trophy to his collection. Fortunately, the hunting guide has observed such a buck several times in this rutting ground. The only question is whether this guest will be able to find the coveted buck now. The hunting guide thoroughly observes the buck for long minutes when he sees the unmistakable antlers of the buck, which is lying on the ground some 100 meters away in front of a hill. The buck is resting and seems calm, but the hunters have to be cautious because the wind is beginning to turn and the buck can sense them by scent at any moment. The fallow deer, thanks to high adaptability, has found suitable habitats in many parts of the world. the deservedly famous Gúth deer population is still unique in its generic traits because nowhere else in the world is there such a great population of fallow deer. Of course, adaptability and suitable habitat alone would not be sufficient to produce such a great population. The quality also depends on the dedicated work of the excellent wildlife managers. It is mainly thanks to their work that this hunting ground has produced the most gold medal fallow trophies in the world. The area's reputation, year after year, continues to grow as more and more hunters come to hunt and take excellent fallow trophies in Gúth, a real paradise for fallow deer hunters.
First-class trophy, understand the unique value of your hunting trophy. With our knowledge of game anatomy and expert craftsmanship, we capture that special moment of your hunt, preserving it for a lifetime. As Europe's largest taxidermy company, we have generations of experience. Since 1999, our team has won international recognition and multiple Best in World and Best of Europe titles. Discover the collection of over 30 awards and download our free portfolio book for inspiring ideas on your next trophy mount.